Welcome to Journey of the Dove. This is part 3 of my journey. It was a beautiful fall morning in October of 2019. We last left the hero of our story, Nikola Tesla, in a state of emotional collapse and exhaustion, too weak to move or speak. His presence was fading in and out. Whatever magic allowed him to be with me seemed to be dissipating. I showered and got dressed anyway, hoping at the last moment Nico would spring back to full vibrance and join me for the day's activities. I had a big day planned, which I'd carefully worked out with Nico himself, fully expecting he would be with me. Today was the day I would be walking the grounds that Nico himself had walked on. I would see in person his laboratory and what was left of his tower at Wardenclyffe. The Wardenclyffe property is now owned by the Tesla Science Center at Wardenclyffe. They rescued the property and are now planning to restore his laboratory, making it into a Nikola Tesla Museum and Science Center. In 2019, they were not yet open for public tours, but I'd arranged for a private tour of the grounds for myself and my husband. After the tour, Nico and I planned to do a ceremony of healing for the property. I would assist, but this was to be Nico's ceremony, led and directed by him. It became apparent that he would not be joining me for the tour and ceremony, but I knew Nico would want me to continue as planned. As I got ready for the day, I glanced over to where Nico typically stood. He was heartbreakingly absent from his usual spot where we chatted and bantered our way through the morning. I considered that perhaps he came into my life only long enough to inform me about being his pigeon. Now that I knew that bit of information, maybe I'd never see him again until I figured out how to become that pigeon and visit him in his time. I sunk onto my knees like some grand tragedian, crying out, "No, he can't leave. Don't leave me, Nico." It felt as if my heart was being ripped from my chest at the mere thought of being apart from my beloved Nico. Is he going to recover? Is he leaving me? I asked my spirit guide Mira between sobs. With her reassurance that he would recover and had no intention of leaving me, I calmed my sobs enough to finish getting ready. It was with a heavy heart that I left a still speechless and exhausted Nico in the care of Mira and headed off to Long Island with my husband. While we head out on the long drive, I'll take this moment to relate how this Wardenclyffe trip came to be. The month prior found me in my hometown, standing in front of the house I grew up in. It's a brown brick house perched at the foot of a mountain, overlooking the valley below. A sun-filled sky reflected in the large windows, the house and neighborhood as beautiful as ever with a mountain rising behind it. I'd spent many sunsets gazing out from those windows, which stretched to cathedral ceiling heights, looking out towards the west as the entire valley was bathed in warm golden light. The soundtrack to my sunset reveries was always Perhaps Love by John Denver, sung as a duo with Placido Domingo. Their velvet voices touched my soul in a way nothing else could reach. Perhaps love is like a window, perhaps an open door. It invites you to come closer. It wants to show you more. And even if you lose yourself and don't know what to do, the memory of love will see you through. I was a melancholy child, haunted by dark secrets of abuse in what outwardly seemed an idyllic life. I didn't feel loved in my childhood home, but I sensed love at times from some vague, unseen entity which I assumed was God. I tried to logic my way into feeling loved, writing lists to myself of why I was valued, why I should be happy, why I should go on living. By high school, I had learned the fine art of self-motivation and looking on the bright side of things. I'd shifted my life into one of positivity and optimism and could honestly say I felt happy. A couple years later in college, when the suppressed memories felt safe enough to come out of the shadows, I was experienced at stuffing things back down. I dove deeper into my religiosity, seeking meaning by spending 1.5 years of my life on a full-time mission for the church. Upon my return home from the mission, I was assaulted yet again in that same house. My entire family turned on me when I went to the police and tried to declare out loud what had happened in secret behind closed doors. The pain of it all was unbearable, and I fled my hometown, bit by bit working through that pain, until there I stood in front of the house with Nikola by my side. How can such a beautiful house, surrounded by such scenic majesty, hold so much suffering? I was ready to be free of it all. I could feel the house, too, was ready to be free of pain. Within my soul, I knew what to do. I raised my hands to the heavens and called down a cleansing, healing light. An intense vibration pulsed through my entire body, into the house, deep into the property, and reverberated through the neighborhood. When I was finished, I could feel the house was freed from my personal traumas and freed from the past. It sparkled like a little gem with its gleaming windows, nestled peacefully in the mountain. Over the next couple weeks, I began learning about the drama of Wardenclyffe Tower. It's a tragic story and plunged Nikola into a state of depression. He despaired of his lofty goals of seeing humanity evolve to a state of enlightenment brought on by his technology, which he hoped would unite the world. On July 4th, 1917, his tower was dynamited to the ground. I could picture Nico standing on the property, disheartened, disillusioned, feeling like a failure, and feeling betrayed by his contemporaries. I thought, surely the Wardenclyffe property and Nico himself would benefit from a healing ceremony, just as I did for my childhood home. Nico agreed. I made the arrangements for a tour and looked forward with excitement and expectation. The Tesla Science Center arranged for a tour guide, but I was expecting a personal tour of the property by Nikola himself. And here I was, on my way to Wardenclyffe without him. I sent a furtive message to Amy and Kat requesting healing energy for Nikola. Logging off from chat, I spent the remainder of the 3-hour drive sending my spirit guide Preetham back and forth to check on Nico's well-being. I still had no concept of spirit being in multiple places at once, nor was I aware of the magic of telepathy. I thought since I'd asked Mira to stay and tend Nico, that my calling on her for updates would leave him alone and unattended if he needed anything. That left Prem as the next option to be my messenger. Thus far, Prem's updates remained the same. Nico was resting, safe in the care of Mira. My husband and I arrived at the property. In spite of my misgivings, I felt the first twinges of anticipation as we were let in the gates and drove to the small outbuilding that serves as a Tesla Science Center office. A thought occurred to me. If I couldn't have Nico with me on the tour, perhaps I could ask a friend of his to be with me. I sent out a request to the spirit of Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, to join me. I felt his presence immediately, and he introduced himself as Sam. Now with my own spirit tour guide, I knocked on the office door to meet the tour guide the Science Center had arranged. I nearly fell backwards as a door opened to a man with an abundance of tousled white hair and a mustache. My tour guide sported a white beard as well, but on the whole made a stunning impression on me as a Mark Twain stand-in. We stepped into the office, and surrounded by paintings and figurines of Nikola, I was finally able to let go of the gloom I'd carried since leaving him that morning. We proceeded on to our tour. Walking the grounds where Nikola had worked on his hopes and dreams was truly special. Central to the grounds is the outline of the tower. On one side of where the tower stood is Nikola's elegant laboratory, designed by the famous architect Stanford White. The lab itself was not yet open to the public, being something of a hazmat situation with the mold and deterioration, but the periphery of the tower base is still intact, with a single bolt still rising from the stone, which is all that's left of the tower itself. A dignified statue of Nikola was donated by the Serbian government and stands on the other side of the tower base. As I walked along, I surreptitiously scattered rose petals in preparation for the healing ceremony. The tour now complete, we said our goodbyes to the tour guide and left the grounds for a much-needed lunch next door. As eager as I was to hurry back home to Nico, I was not yet done. After lunch, I found the perfect spot looking in from the vents, directly facing where the tower would have been. "Are you going to wave your arms all around like you do?" my husband asked as he helped me set out the ceremony supplies. "Probably," I answered, trying to recall when he'd seen me do this. "If you don't mind, I'll wait in the car." My husband, now safe in the car, was spared from public embarrassment. I lit a candle and began the smoke clearing, calling in all benevolent beings and friends of Nikola who wished to attend. I could sense the presence of an overwhelming number and variety of beings. Sam, who remained by my side, informed me there were thousands in attendance. I shared with the crowd a brief summary of the history of the tower. After my opening comments, Nico was to give a speech. Flustered by his absence and not quite sure what to do next, I apologized and explained he had taken ill. I was surprised to hear from the audience someone asking if they could go do healing work on him. I was delighted at that, and a small contingent of attendees went to Nikola's aid. Sam encouraged me to continue the ceremony as planned. I proceeded to apologize on behalf of Nikola to the indigenous people whose land it had been, requesting that they allow the property to now be dedicated for the purpose of serving Mother Earth and humanity, and all living creatures in this and other dimensions. Accepting the apology, the indigenous chief expressed his tribe's wish to be the guardians of the property. I felt a round of approval from the crowd, and I agreed. I then called on all healers who were present, and together we did the healing for the property and buildings. We energetically cleared the pain and sorrow of Nikola himself and the years of neglect, abuse, and toxicity the land and structures had suffered since. As we bathed the area in healing light, my mind's eye opened, and I could see the tower in its completed state, far taller than I could have imagined. Now was the moment I'd been most excited to share with Nikola. Calling on my higher self, I pulled energy from the cosmos into the tower to power it up. Bright sparks and crackles of electricity buzzed all around, the tower at the epicenter, as the energy moved into the cupola, down to the underground portion, and back up again. The tower had come to life, and I smiled from ear to ear, forgetting all else and losing myself to the excitement of the chaotic scene. After a moment, the energy settled into a low buzzing hum. I'm accustomed to seeing pictures of the tower in its unfinished state, the bare bones of the scaffolding still exposed. I saw it now, as Nikola had intended it to be, and it was radiantly beautiful. The scaffolding now covered, the tower had been painted white, its windows and doors trimmed in red, and the metallic cupola now emanated a soft glow. It stood in elegant contrast to the brick-red laboratory with its white-trimmed windows and doors and wrought iron chimney crown. We placed a protective shield around the property which would protect it while still allowing the energy transmission. The shield encompassed the full height of the tower above and the network of underground structures below. Nico had requested me to take water from the creek of my own property, and I now poured it into the ground, per Sam's instruction, to complete the ceremony. I thanked those in attendance and blew out the candle. "How did I do?" I asked, turning to Sam. After giving reassurances of a perfectly done ceremony and saying how pleased Nikola would be, he added, You do have a most beautiful romance, the kind of romance only a man like Nikola could have. I smiled, and as I gathered my things back up, 2 women appeared to me. They gave me their names, Catherine and Anna. They wanted Nikola to know they'd been there and asked that I give their regards to him. Intrigued, I promised to pass on their message. As we made our way back home, maps routed us through the heart of Manhattan. I cursed at the algorithm which decided that New York City rush hour traffic would be the best and fastest route. An already long drive nearly doubled, and I resigned myself to again sending Prem back and forth for status updates on Nico. As we inched forward, Prem optimistically informed me he was doing much better. After what seemed an interminable drive time, we finally neared the freeway exit to our home. To my surprise, Nikola appeared in the car. Thrilled to see him, I still scolded him for not staying put and resting. "I'm feeling wonderful, completely revived," he claimed. It was clear that he could barely prop himself up in the back seat, but I was so happy and relieved that I didn't complain further. Finally home, Nico collapsed back into bed, but was able to talk and interact as I regaled him with the retelling of the day's adventures. He gave a small mysterious smile when I mentioned Catherine and Anna. Then I repeated to him Sam's comment. "You do have a most beautiful romance, the kind of romance only a man like Nikola could have." "And a woman like you," Nico added, smiling broadly. As I write this episode over a year later, I've had time to digest the experience further. On that day in October 2019, when I saw Wardenclyffe Tower in all its radiant glory, I gave no thought to how it came to be. I simply accepted that somehow, in some alternate dimension, the tower existed. I had no idea back then the part I'd play in helping Nico move from the dimension in which his tower had been dynamited to the ground and sold for scrap, to the dimension in which his tower stood, complete and fully operational. Nor did I comprehend why Nikola chose to visit me as his human self, as opposed to how he shows up to my shaman friend Kat, as an ascended master who never becomes exhausted, ill, or beset by other sufferings of humanity. When I returned home that day and got caught up on chat, I read through the fascinating discussion between Amy and Kat as they tried to figure him out. The version of Nikola interacting with Kat had been completely well, his usual sprightly, whimsical self, and here Amy and I were discussing Nikola's poor health and the healing bubble she'd placed around him. Amy explained to a very confused Kat, "I think his oversoul is an ascended master or part of Christ's consciousness, but he just felt so human to me that it was bugging me. As it turns out, we're interacting with the actual Tesla, or at least I am. He's figured out how the universe works well enough that he's just jumping timelines or working in other dimensions to finish his project." By the end of the weekend, after we all mulled that over, I was still rather confused myself. My other spirit guides never got sick. Why did Nico? Amy clarified further. This version of him is human. If you had the flu and journeyed to another dimension, you would still have the flu. The question is, why does he choose to come through in this way versus his higher self? Kat replied that she was still confused as to how an ascended spirit can become ill. Amy answered, "It's another human version of him. He's not a spirit when he comes through this way. He's a person, just like us." Still baffled, I asked her how can he carry his sickness with him in spirit, as he wasn't in a physical form when he was with me. "Not physical, but he's also not in spirit," she explained. "He's in another dimension. That's different." Little did I know that I was about to embark on my own time-traveling adventures and join him in those other dimensions, and in his human lifetime as well. Nikola Tesla would meet me in his visions long before he met me as a pigeon. It was his turn to be perplexed and wonder who this mysterious woman was who seemed to know and love him. Both of us have now had the fun of meeting the other incognito and having our beloved fall in love all over again. I now appreciate why he comes to me as his human self. He wants to experience the full range of human emotions and drama with me by his side. Our love allows us to see through the illusion of space and time to be with each other. Together we are creating the reality in which his tower and other projects are successfully brought into the world. Love is what powers this new reality, for it is love, not technology, which unites the world and guides humanity's evolution. Thank you for listening, and I hope you join me in future episodes as I begin my journeys into alternate dimensions.